Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's season, we are covering some of the most important and powerful commands in the 11 commands: explode, join, split, and trim. These are the tools that will give you complete control over your models, allowing you to break things apart, pull them back together, divide them, and cut them exactly the way you want. Trust me, once you master these, your workflow will never be the same. So grab a coffee and let's jump right in. The next command we are going to learn is explode. Let me explain it with a simple example. Imagine we have a rectangle, a polyline, and a circle on our screen. If we select the rectangle and run the explode command, something interesting happens. The four sides of the rectangle separate from each other. Instead of being one closed shape, they become four independent lines. The same thing applies to a polyline. It breaks down into its individual segments. So, what kind of objects can you explode? Explode works on objects that have sharp corners or straight segments. In other words, objects with edges or breaks. For example, a rectangle, a polyline, or any shape made of straight lines can be exploded. But a circle, no, it doesn't have any sharp corners or breaks. So explode won't work on it. And the same goes for smooth curves. They can't be exploded either. Now, remember what I told you in the previous season about rebuild? If you want to rebuild an object that has sharp corners like a rectangle, the best way is to explode it first, then rebuild each segment individually, and finally apply your changes. This gives you much more control over the final shape. The next command located right next to explode is join, and it does exactly the opposite. Join allows you to reconnect separated pieces back into a single object. For example, if you've exploded a rectangle into four separate lines, you can select them all and run join, and they'll become a single rectangle again. But here's a very important rule. The pieces must be in the exact right position for join to work. That means the end of the line must touch the start of another line. They need to share the same point. If you have two lines that just cross each other like an X shape, they will never join because their ends don't touch. So remember, join only works when the pieces are properly connected at their endpoints. Next up, the split command. Split allows you to divide an object using another object as a cutting tool. Let me show you with an example. Imagine we have a square and a circle that overlap each other. If we want to split the square using the circle, we select the square first, then run the split command. Next, we select the circle as the cutting object, and then we press enter or simply right click, which, as I've mentioned before, is much faster and more natural. And just like that, the square is now divided into separate pieces at the point where the circle crosses it. You can also do the reverse, split the circle using the square. Once you've split both objects, you can join the pieces together in new ways, giving you endless creative possibilities. And here's another great feature. If you have two lines that cross each other and you want to join them into a single shape, you can split them using each other and then join the pieces you want. This is incredibly useful for creating complex geometries. But a split isn't just for cutting objects with other objects. You can also split a curve at any point you choose. For example, if you have a smooth curve with no breaks, you can select it, run the split command, and then look at the command bar. You'll see an option called point. If you activate that option, you can click anywhere on the curve and split it at the exact point. You can do this as many times as you want. There's no limit. However, there's one rule to keep in mind. If you want to split a closed shape like a circle, you need to split it at least 2 points. Why? Because if you only split it at 1 point, the circle stays intact. Nothing changes. So always remember, closed shapes need at least 2 split points to be divided properly. Now, let's move on the final command of today's season, trim. Trim is one of the most practical and frequently used commands in Rhino and Matrix. It allows you to cut away unwanted parts of an object. Let me show you with a visual example. I'll draw a circle and then use a command called array to create a pattern around it. Before we start trimming, let me remind you of an important tip I mentioned earlier. Zooming in is crucial, especially when you're working with small objects. Also remember the difference between dragging from left to right and dragging from right to left. This affects how your selection works. Once you've selected your objects, run the trim command. Now, every time you click on a line, Rhino will cut it at the nearest intersection. You can also drag your mouse across multiple lines and Rhino will trim them all at once. This is a huge time saver when you're working with complex patterns. And here's a final pro tip: if you accidentally trim something you didn't mean to, don't reach for Ctrl Z immediately. Instead, use the undo button right inside the command bar. It will only undo the last trim without affecting the rest of your work. So, to recap everything we covered today, the explode command breaks down objects with sharp corners into individual pieces. Join, that reconnects separated pieces back into a single object. Split, that divided objects using other objects or points. And the trim command cut away unwanted parts of objects. And pro tips for you: explode before rebuilding sharp cornered objects. Join only works when endpoints touch. Closed shapes need at least 2 split points. Use the command bar undo for quick fixes. These commands are absolute game changers. They give you the power to break, reshape, divide, and refine your designs with incredible precision. And that wraps up today's season. Today we covered 4 powerful commands: explode, join, split, and trim, which are some of the most important tools in the 11 commands. These will become the backbone of your workflow, giving you complete control over your jewelry designs. In the next video, we'll explore even more tools and techniques. If you found this helpful, please hit like, Subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment if you have any questions. I read every single one. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy designing!